Redline Logbook here for Hestia Familia Part 15. Where we left off, Ryu and Bell were finally rescued after killing the Juggernaut, and now everyone is back home. Now, Bell was given a standard cast for his arm after it was restored, but he took part in the Battle of Sword Oratoria, and we will talk about that when we talk about the Loki Familia. All you need to know right now is that this caused extra strain on his messed up arm. As a result of this, when he went for his 2-week checkup at the Dia Sect Familia, he was heavily scolded, and Dia Saint decided to put him in a new cast, one made of adamantite where he couldn't even move his fingers. She also informs him that if he comes back in his next checkup and his hand is once again gotten worse, she's going to strap him to the bed and leave him there until it's healed. So the Hestia Familia still has to finish off everything they dealt with in their expedition. For example, Bell got his status updated. All of his stats went from I to B. In total, he gained more than 3,000 points of XP. He was even on the verge of leveling up to level 5, but of course Hestia kept that to herself because he literally just became a level 4, and she doesn't want to have to deal with any of that. After seeing such a massive increase in his stats, she decided to ask him what happened. And when he explained that he almost died like 8 times, she was just done. She was just now tired for the rest of the day. She didn't want to do any more increase in stats, and she also felt bad for Eina because Bell was going to have to give the same update to her. Hestia thought about even going out to drinks with Eina just to console each other with having to deal with Bell. As for not the Eina report, but the official report to the guild, what the Hestia Familia are going to mention is they failed their expedition, and that's it. Lilly has no interest in them mentioning that Bell ended up in the deep floors, because one, this could end up raising their status, and if that happened, their taxes would also go up. But this also means that since they made it to the deep floors, then that means next time they go on an expedition, they would have to go even deeper. It'd be a minimum of the 38th floor, and that's not something that the Hestia Familia has any interest in doing right now. Plus, because they failed the expedition, they're now in the red. So Lilly decides just to forge the report, say they went to the lower floors, failed the expedition because of the moss huge, and that's that. She gets the money that is required to pay the fine for failing the expedition, and she actually brings Haruhime with her to the guild to show her how to do proper paperwork. Bell spends a lot of his time recovering outside, wandering around town. After being so far deep in the dungeon for so long in the dark, he just feels that it's necessary to decompress in less stressful situations. The reason for this is because he's always on edge, even when he's supposed to be relaxing. And if you're on edge when you're supposed to be relaxing, then that means you can never relax. For example, is when he's just sitting in a chair, at a certain point, his body tells him a threat is nearby and he jumps up. And even worse than that is that he isn't sleeping properly. While he's in bed, he'll just randomly wake up from night terrors from the deep floor, and he just can't get back to bed properly. Haruhime has to come into his room and read him stories of old heroes, and just has to just lie with him until he's able to fall asleep again. Welf, whose room is right next to Bell's, can hear this happen every night, and he's very worried about his friend. He wants to know if he can do anything for Bell, but honestly, he really can't. He just has to be there and make sure Bell doesn't go over the edge. Welf just needs to continue playing the role of the older brother. There is some good news, though. The Familia finally has spending money. They're able to just buy things that they want so they can enjoy their time, like Welf buying black tea. In fact, Haruhime, who is a former noble, recognizes how well Welf is able to properly make tea because of his noble background, and she actually compliments him on it. He doesn't like that. Mikito got herself a shogi board, a game she used to play back in the Far East, teaches it to Lilly, and all of this really does help Bell decompress from what he went through. In fact, something that also helps out is him and Hestia just sitting by a fire, talking about how they kind of miss it living in the church, just the two of them. They do love the fact that they're now a big familia and a big home, but obviously they have fond memories for the old days. The next day, Lilly has her stats updated, and she's now a level 2. At first, she was unable to understand what Hestia was telling her, because Lilly has been a level 1 for a long time, and she never expected her to ever become a level 2 because she is a supporter. Lilly was the happiest at this moment that we've seen in a long time. She was in full-on celebration mode, and of course everyone else in the Familia was happy to celebrate with her. Along with her level up, she got 2 new abilities. The first one was a standard ability, which automatically magnifies her voice across long distances for members of her Familia. Now, she can't hear them when they scream, and no one else but her Familia can hear her, but the point is, this allows her to do her role as a commander more efficiently, because now she can order her Familia members across an entire battlefield. Her second ability, one that you always receive when you level up, she has 2 options you can choose from. Abnormal resistance, which as the name implies, it gives you resistance to different types of poisons, venoms, and diseases. Or the other ability, which gives her the ability to craft medicines, potions, and other things like that. She considers picking this one because it would allow them to create their own potions and such, so they can save money. At the same time, they can also sell any extra she creates. But she decides the best choice would be her to go with the abnormal resistant, because what matters to her more isn't making money or even saving money, it's staying next to Belle. And the abnormal resistance will allow her to go deeper into the dungeon and not worry about death. Plus, she can still haggle and deal with nausea. She actually enjoys doing. After she's done celebrating, she then decides to go for a walk with some cash. She's actually headed to an old flower shop she used to work and live at. She ends up bumping into the prom that she disguised herself as during the war game, Luan. Once he sees her again, he of course still hates her because he's now seen as a traitor by every Familia in Aurorio and no longer get adventure work. He's stuck as a member of some restaurant. Because of his hatred for her, he just wants to insult her now that he's actually run into her. He even comments on why she's smiling so much. She informs him on the level up, and of course he's jealous and angry about this, and actively criticizing her. She of course sympathizes because she knows exactly how he feels, how all this time she was basically in his situation. But even though she sympathizes with him, she doesn't back down. She straight up says, I almost died multiple times to get this level up. I worked hard, I earned it. You have no right to say I don't deserve it. And as they continue to argue, the old couple that owned the flower shop call out to Lilly. She then ducks behind a group of people, uses her Cinderella spell to transform into a young elf. So when the couple catch up, they realize it's not Lilly, quotation marks. They look like they're about to walk away, but Luna then asks them, are you looking for Lilly from Hestia, Familia? And they say yes, and they explain how when she was with them, they were attacked by the Soma Familia, and they immediately blamed her and kicked her out, and basically abandoned an innocent girl who did nothing wrong. And they feel nothing but shame for this, and regret, and what makes it even worse, every month, a sack of money would show up at their doorstep, clearly from Lilly, and the guild is just eating away at them. Luan then asks them why don't they just go to Hestia's home? They can talk to Lilly there at any time, and they admit they're too ashamed to do that. Lilly, still disguised as an elf, asks to buy the flowers that the couple are holding at the moment with the cash she has on hand. They tell her that's too much money for these flowers, especially since they were about to throw these away. They were the leftovers. Lilly then says, it's fine. Something really good just happened to me and I want to celebrate. The old couple may or may not know this is Lilly. It's really hard to tell, but they accept the money, they give her the flowers, and of course they thank each other before the old couple leaves. Luan then asks Lilly, why don't you just go talk to them? They clearly feel sorry about what happened. And Lily's response is, I'm also afraid. But she's happy now because she got some of her closure. Plus, that was the last of the money that was needed to pay off the damages. So this was a great day for Lilly. She didn't just level up, but this was the last scar that was left on her from the Soma Familia that she was finally able to get rid of. While Lilly was doing that, Belle was off with Eina giving his report of what happened. At a certain point, she just stopped writing in her official files and started writing in her notebook because she realized everything that Belle was saying could not be reported. And Hestia was right. Poor Eina was disturbed and horrified by what Belle went through. She agreed with Lilly's decision to lie about the expedition results. While this is illegal, Eina just couldn't allow this information to get out into the public. First off, the Juggernaut. She quickly learned from Belle that apparently it's a secret kept by the guild, by Oranos himself. Therefore, now that she knows about it, it's her duty to keep it a secret. 2, Belle also knew Galewind, who is supposed to be dead right now, and apparently isn't, so that has to be kept secret. And last but not least, all of his abilities are now B. And based on the public report, that wouldn't make sense. It would be suspicious that all of his abilities are B when all he did was go to the lower floors, fail an expedition because of a irregular moss huge, and then be forced to retreat. As a result of that, all of that information also has to be kept secret. So basically, Eina just has a bunch of files that she's going to hide from the guild and everyone else, like she always does when it comes to Belle, because he's constantly doing this to her. At a certain point, she decided to order him to stand up. She walks towards him. He thinks he's going to get lectured, but in reality, she hugs him. She thanks him for coming back, because not all adventurers do when it comes to the deep floors. In fact, not all adventurers that she worked with came back, so she's just grateful that he did. But their hug lasted a little too long, and they both get embarrassed by it. So when they pull away, the only excuse Eina can think of, get away from him for a second, is to say that she's going to bring a bunch of notes. She's going to teach him how to survive in the deep floors, all the way up to floor 50. Belle has no interest in wanting to go through a massive study session of Eina's, because she's a slave driver when it comes to learning, but he's also embarrassed, so he just goes along with it. So he's about to spend the rest of the day learning about the deep floors. Before she leaves, he calls out to her, and then when she looks back, he's bowing to her and thanking her. Because of all the lessons she gave him, he was able to survive. He knows so much about the dungeon because of her. He knows so much about the monsters, their strengths, their weaknesses because of her. He honestly survived all this time because of her. On her way to get her note for the deep floors, she stopped by one of her co-workers, the werewolf Rose. And in front of everyone, she hands her a jar of money. Bell is officially in his 6th month as an adventurer, and because of this, she won the bet. So the money is now all Eina's. I will discuss this bet in another video when I talk about the guild. All that matters is Eina has decided to use this money to go on a date with Bell. So they're going to have dinner together. Now, she rationalizes this as in, well, this money was a bet about Bell. It would be wrong her accept it. She should spend it on Bell. This is the best way to do that. If she tried to buy him weapons or armor or items, he'd reject it. So having dinner is just a responsible thing to do. That's the best way to do it. Once again, she's rationalizing she wants to go on a date with Bell. But yes, after Bell's long lesson, the two go out for dinner. Welf on this day also gets his status updated. Most of his stats go from I to G, pretty simple. But he also gets a new ability, one that gives fire magic increased power, plus also he has somewhat of a resistance to fire. Its primary use would be for magic swords that produce fire. Now his fire magic swords will always be his strongest ones. What he does on this day is he goes to Hephaestus to show off his new magic sword. She examines it and says it's adequate. Welf is extremely happy to hear that word. While the word adequate doesn't sound like much, coming from the god of smithing, that's high praise. It means he's finally in her ballpark of existence as a smith. She also tries to say other nicer things about it, but she of course flusters herself and rambles a bit because obviously she's in love with Welf and she's waiting for the day for them to be together, but Welf is too excited to worry about that. The man then just stands up and declares that he's going to bring her something even greater, that he isn't just going to settle for what he did here, that he's going to keep working harder to improve his skills and finally earn his spot next to her. He quickly then walks out of the room, which upsets Hephaestus because she wanted to actually spend more time with him, but he's too excited to just stand there, and he's too embarrassed to express these emotions in front of her, so he makes sure to go outside while walking down the streets and just starts screaming. After a couple of weeks, Bell finally got his cast removed, and they all decide to have a celebration at the Hostess of Fertility. It wasn't just Hestia's Familia, it was also Miak and Takumuchi Familia as well. Everyone except for the gods, because Hestia had to work that day, so all their gods, plus Hephaestus, Loki, and Demeter, decided to go out drinking together after her work. Lilly and Naza were both negotiating, as always, on prices for Naza's products, while at the same time having devilish smiles on their faces as they try to swindle each other. Haruhime was surrounded by Takumuchi Familia, trying to catch up from the old days back when they were all kids back in the Far East. Belle was spending time with Welf and Cassandra, just talking about day-to-day things, nothing special. Daphne happily just sat there listening in, and the party just kept going and going. Nothing really big happened. Belle started looking around to see where the Loki Familia, and especially Eyes, could be, because he hasn't been able to talk to her in a while. He was hoping to use the fact that he no longer has his cast as an excuse to train with her again, but they never show up. Chloe and Anya, of course, messing around with them, slacking off at work. Linear complains at them and calls them idiots, as always. Start to fight the three of them. That's when Mamma Mia tells them to get back to work. Nothing new that happened there. No, the real change is between Seer and Ryu. Seer points out that Ryu is acting strange. Bells knows this is true because the entire time he's been trying to interact with her, she constantly looks away from him. And so Seer then asks, did something happen between you and the deep floors? And Bell, of course, has no real response for this. At least nothing he wants to admit out loud. But the thing is, anytime Ryu has to get anywhere near their table, she immediately does a 180 spin to prevent making eye contact with Belle. And once she's done taking her order, she then immediately flies back into the kitchen. Seer then asks that. Explain that. Belle, of course, refuses to do so, and Seer bops him on the head. Welf then tells Belle, you should probably take care of that. The sooner the better. Belle then follows Ryu to the back of the restaurant outside, where she immediately then attacks him out of surprise. He catches her fist and says, it's just me. She calms down for a second until she realizes they're now holding hands, and then she decides to flip him and smash him into the pavement, knocking him unconscious. Anya then starts calling for Ryu, and because Ryu is embarrassed by the fact that she just knocked Belle out because they were holding hands, decides to pick him up and run away. She carries him all the way into town, into some back alley area, and just lies him down on a bench. He has no injuries, but she used her healing magic on him anyway because she's freaking out. And then she gives him a lap pillow. Once she realizes what she did, she then rationalizes it. This isn't because she likes him and she wants to give him a lap pillow because that's what lovers do. No. She's doing this because his head would be uncomfortable sleeping on the bench. She then basically starts to apologize to the unconscious Belle, and she then leans in close to tell him that she could never hate him, but before those words leave her lips, she realizes that he's awake. She then demands that he get up. Of course, his eyes open up, he pops up and sits next to her, and she says, "Didn't I tell you never to do that to me again?" Referring to back when they were in the lower floors and he pretended to be unconscious while a barbarian was about to eat him. He apologizes, and then she quickly asked, "How long have you been awake?" And he said, "Just right then there," so he didn't hear anything she said. Belle then asks, "Are you mad at me for some reason?" Because he just still doesn't understand why she refuses to look at him. And she says, "No, I just don't want to look at your face." This, of course, breaks Belle. He starts to freak out. Why does she find his face so revolting? But she's able to center herself and then explain to him that this has nothing to do with him. She is the one with the issue at the moment. And she wants to make sure that he knows she doesn't hate him at all. And she finally looks him in the eye. And now they're finally looking at each other. They can finally have a proper conversation. And so the two of them just talk about everything and anything. They talk about what they've been doing since they got out of the hospital. She talks about how she was eating Mamma Mia's cooking. She was enjoying doing her job again. He talked about how he spent time with his Familia because of his cast. Basic stuff. So yeah, the two of them were finally able to get past this little thing about her avoiding him. And then Belle decides to ask Ryu, "Can you tell me about the Estrella Familia? I would like to know about Elise and the others." So Ryu decides to tell him an embarrassing story of hers, how she first came to Aurorio. Haruhime and Makoto also got their stats updated. Most of Makoto's stats increased all the way up to the G's. In fact, one was even an F, which means, not counting Belle, she had the second highest group in the Familia, right behind Lilly. She also qualified for a new skill, but Hestia decided to not give it to her. Reason being that it seemed to be a self-destructing type. You unlock skills based on your personality and your actions, which makes perfect sense because if you know anything about Makoto, she has a tendency to sacrifice her own body to win fights. She literally caused herself to blow up after an injured fascist with her magic to help save Haruhime. During the war game with Apollo, she used her own gravity on herself to trap a few of his enemies, and then once again used her gravity on herself to trap the Absafina, but that time she was doing it so much that she was cracking her own bones. As for Haruhime, all of her stats stayed in I, except for her magic, which went up into D. She also got a new skill, name I cannot pronounce, where it increases her magic power and also regulates how much mind she used. So, 4 members of the Familia go into the upper floors to train Haruhime. Haruhime herself, Belle, Welf, and Lilly. Belle would like everyone to fight all together, but the rest of them realize that wishful thinking. She's never going to learn how to fight, but Haruhime still does need to learn how to protect herself so she doesn't become a burden when they go to deeper and deeper levels. They apparently been having her practice with multiple different weapons. All of them are either too heavy or just not the way she can fight. She's currently using a stick and also not working out. She got beat up by a goblin. Goblins and kobolds aren't really strong enough to kill a level 1, even one as weak as Haruhime, so she's getting bruised, but she isn't getting really hurt. And if she gets into too much trouble, Lily's there to kill the monster. In fact, Lilly personally volunteered to protect Haruhime because, well, she wants to get her revenge on all the lower level monsters that used to cause her trouble. Welf points out that Lilly isn't even there to help Haruhime train. She's just there to mess around and celebrate the fact that she's a level 2. She's there and she's telling them that they need to stop having Haruhime train with weapons and she's just focused on her spell casting. Aisha was also the one who convinced Belle and Hestia to not allow Haruhime to level up to level 2 just yet, because her having a level 2's power and not being able to use it properly would be a waste anyway, so it's better just to leave her at 1 still. Hestia agreed to this, and so that's why she didn't just not level her up, she also didn't tell Haruhime she qualified for a level up. They also decided not to tell Lilly so she can celebrate the fact that she was the only one who leveled up Familia. But while the 3 of them are having their discussion, Haruhime successfully parries an attack from a goblin and knocks it out, surprising everyone. So her training is working. While she'll never be a fighter, she'll at least be able to survive during a fight. After letting his arm rest, Belle finally had permission to go back into the dungeon. And while on the 20th floor, they encountered a Familia that just got attacked by an irregular. 2 of the Familia members are animal people, a male and a female. The male is currently holding the dead body of the female, and with tears in his eyes, he's begging Belle to kill the monster. Belle thinks to himself this is actually a pretty ordinary day. Adventurers go into the dungeon, They're killed by monsters. That's just how the world goes. But even so, this angers him. The idea of people being murdered by monsters who just endlessly flood from the dungeon. And so he fulfills the revenge that was requested upon him. But even then, it doesn't feel like he accomplished anything. It's not like that monster was going to escape from the dungeon, wreak havoc on the world. All Bell did was just kill a monster. Same old, same old. That's a really humbling feeling for Bell to have. When they finally exit, the entire city of Aurorio is basically pitch black, and people in white robes gathering in the central park. Bell asks what was going on, and the rest of his family explains that this is Elgia, a holiday to celebrate the heroes of the past, the ones who successfully forced the monsters back into the dungeon, sealed it, and protected the world. That's why all the magic stone lamps have been turned off, and the entire city can only be lit by candlelight. It's so people can experience the same way the heroes of the past lived. This large crowd of people, as more people gather in, will walk while singing songs from one monument to the ancient heroes to another, laying down flowers, singing hymns, and of course they will also visit the graves of adventurers who have died recently, because this holiday is also meant to mourn the dead who have died in the last year. And so many people who are on this procession are just people who are there to mourn their dead family members, dead allies, dead lovers. This holiday will last all night until daybreak. Bell then thinks about certain words that his grandfather told him. That in Aurora you can find anything and everything you want, fame, riches, but because of that, anyone who goes there will be swept up in the current of the world. Many adventurers will die for the sake of few heroes that will emerge, so their stories can live on forever. Bell thinks to himself he's finally understanding what his grandfather meant by these words, and he declares once more that he wants to be a hero. The next day, Bell asks the Familia of the girl that died yesterday if he could visit her grave. They agree to it. He goes to their Familia's plot. He finds her grave there. He lays down flowers. He prays for her. And then he goes to the monument for the heroes, examines it, he looks at their names. He then hears something behind him. When he turns around, it's Ice, the one person he's been wanting to see for a while. He sees her and he realizes that she's been crying. But when she speaks to him so calmly, he thinks he's just seeing things. She asked if he was visiting a grave. He said yes. He asked her if she was doing the same. She says yes. He wants to talk to her, but there's really nothing they can say to each other at the moment. Basically, that's the end of their conversation. They just say hi to each other and then separate. Belle goes over to the grave that she was at, and it was actually a monument to the greatest hero that ever lived, Albert. Belle then begins to remember something that he forgot, something that his grandfather told him back in those old stories. This is something that no one else would know except for Belle, because Zeus was his grandfather, and that Albert had a last name, Wallstein, which is extremely close to Isa's last name, Wallenstein. Bell thinks to himself that, it is common for people to name their children after heroes, but there's something in the back of his head screaming that that's not it, that there's actually a more personal connection. And he begins to think to himself, is Is just a descendant of Albert? Is the greatest hero of the past related to the greatest hero of today? Alright, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up so you enjoy more Danmachi and other things. Thank you, and have a great day.